All right, so tonight, now we're going to turn to the topic of cryptocurrency. And I've thought a lot about what we want to talk about. And if you have questions about it, please feel free to chime in. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat. And guys, if I say something that you want me to further clarify or talk more about, or if you have thoughts to add, just jump right in there. We'll just make it as conversational as possible. So the first question I wanted to answer is, what is cryptocurrency? Okay, so you hear these words thrown about a lot, and a lot of times when you say cryptocurrency, it's synonymous with things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, magic internet money, distributed ledger technology. There's all these words that are used to describe what cryptocurrency is. And so I'm going to throw some words out there, but I'm going to try to give you a little bit more explanation of what each of these words mean and why this, ultimately to figure out why this stuff is important. So what is a cryptocurrency? A true cryptocurrency, and specifically I'm talking about Bitcoin here, because Bitcoin is the one that's the most famous. Everybody pretty much has heard of Bitcoin, what it is. And so I'm going to be describing Bitcoin because there are all kinds of iterations of cryptocurrencies with different uses and different use cases, utility tokens, smart contract tokens.
Hundreds.
We'll talk more about. Yes, thousands even. Yeah. Thousands. I think on coinmarketcap.com there were like 6,900 cryptocurrencies listed on there as of today. So what is a cryptocurrency? A cryptocurrency is a decentralized, permissionless, borderless, censorship-resistant, immutable money. And I'm talking about Bitcoin there particularly. So let's go back and break those down one at a time. Decentralized. Okay. And we were talking earlier, this is the point where we at the beginning, we're supposed to act like we haven't been talking about this and we're just now getting together and talking. But we've been talking for a little bit about this to kind of talk about how we wanted to go about having this discussion. And I think Mike brought up a great point about doing a thought experiment about creating our own cryptocurrency. So how would you create it if we were going to have our own cryptocurrency? Or maybe not necessarily a cryptocurrency, but our own currency.
First of all, the name's going to be Magic Internet Money.
Magic Internet Money.
That's way cooler. Way cooler.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, I think cryptocurrency, either they've barely heard of it, or they've heard a little bit about it, or they heard some negative connotations to it. But as far as the decentralized part, how does that work? Well, if we were all sort of living in a village, and each house in that village kept their own sort of ledger, kind of like your checkbook thing, right? But it would be for everybody in the village. So every time someone exchanged money with somebody else, if Joe bought something from Bill and they changed money, then everybody would write that down in their ledger. Yeah. And so that spread out and then everybody's ledger or their checkbook would all have to match.
Yeah. So we'd announce a transaction.
Right.
Like Mike buys an apple from John for $1, and everybody would write down minus $1 from Mike's account plus $1 to John's account. Right.
That's correct.
And we'd announce it, and everybody would write it down, and then you would achieve consensus.
They would have to agree. Everyone would agree, and then that transaction is confirmed.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah.
Now take that from the village.
Yeah.
Worldwide.
Yeah. Right. With thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of ledgers potentially.
Right.
That keep up with this, and so every time a transaction is accomplished or tried, it gets announced to the network, and then it gets confirmed in all these ledgers across the world, which makes it decentralized. So it's not just one, like right now, if I pay you through PayPal or through Apple Pay or whatever, it's not decentralized, it's centralized. So if I send you $1 on Apple Pay right now, Apple knows I've got a couple $100 in my Apple Pay account. It deducts my account and puts it in your account. But it's not a decentralized ledger. It's
the only one keeping up with it.
They're the only ones to keep up with it. So that's what makes Bitcoin decentralized. It's permissionless. Unlike if I try to send you $1 and Apple thinks you're a bad guy, then they may not let that transaction go through. They could stop it. Whereas with Bitcoin, it's permissionless. There's no middleman. There's no gatekeeper that keeps that transaction from going through on the network. You announce the transaction to the network. It gets uploaded in one of the blocks in the blockchain, which we can talk about later if you guys have questions about it. But I want to try not to get too bogged down in the technology, though we could. So it's permissionless. It's borderless. So there's no Bitcoin company. You can't go out to Silicon Valley and find the Bitcoin company that runs the Bitcoin ledger. It's decentralized. It's all over the world.
Well, and importantly,
Yeah.
it's not a USA Bitcoin.
Yeah.
There's not a Bitcoin for Spain. There's not one for Russia. It's Bitcoin.
Right.
It's one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And because of all that, it's censorship resistant. So that means that nobody can shut it down. Nobody can keep you from transacting on the network. If you have a legitimate Bitcoin address and you post a legitimate transaction, it will get uploaded, as long as you have a high enough fee in there to get it added to a block.
That's not to say that a government can't try to outlaw those
Yeah.
types of transactions or cryptocurrencies in general, or do something with their internet,
Right.
but they cannot themselves affect a Bitcoin transaction.
The balance, yeah. Yeah, there are ways you could blacklist certain accounts so that and so the government could say, if you receive a transaction from this account, then you should not interact with that person. So there's some things that the government can do, but it's not ultimately, it can't affect the ledger.
But the point is, like, Venezuela
Yeah.
cannot change the blockchain. They
Right.
cannot alter your Bitcoin transaction. They
Yeah.
may make it legal or illegal, but they cannot alter it.
Right, exactly. And so, and then finally, it's immutable money, okay, and which means that once the transaction's done, it can't be undone, right? And so it's all those things kind of work together, saying the same thing, multiple different ways. It's immutable. It can't be changed. Nobody can go in and change the ledger. So if I, again, back to the Apple example, if I send you $1, it's possible theoretically that Apple could go in and add a zero to it and transfer $10, from you to me, or from me to you. And so, those kind of things can happen in a centralized, on a centralized ledger, but not in a decentralized ledger. Because if somebody tried to change it on one of the ledgers, so let's say you've got back to the tribal community. If you had 20 people in the community and they all had 20 ledgers, and one person tried to change the ledger, and he said, "Hey, no, Mike paid John $10 for that apple," and he's the only one that had that, everybody would look down at their ledger and say, "No, it was only $1." And he would get kicked out. They would, kick him out of the network, so to speak. And that happens today with Bitcoin. If somebody tries to publish a bad transaction or a state of the network that's wrong, they'll get kicked out.
So you can't have a bad actor, in this instance a node or someone, trying to insert false information into the blockchain that would change
Right.
that transaction.
Right, yeah.
Now, that's good and bad, right? I mean, you can't fix something that
Mm-hmm.
someone did by mistake either within a blockchain transaction. Once it's
Right.
happened, it's happened.
Yeah, and there have been multiple examples of that where somebody, does a wrong decimal point. Instead of sending 1 Bitcoin, they send 10 Bitcoins or something like that. So instead of sending, 12,000 some odd dollars, they send $120,000. And hopefully, if it's a legitimate, transaction that's going on and it's two, people with reputations to uphold, they would send the money back. But they don't have to, and there's nobody you can appeal to get your money back. It's done. So code is law on the Bitcoin network, and if that,
Well, you're not going to get that text from your credit card company
Yeah.
saying, "Did
You
you
need it."
authorize this charge?"
yeah, right.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, none of that will happen. Which makes it, that's the double-edged sword of it.
It is.
It's a very much a double-edged sword to think about. But okay, so that's a little bit of a definition of what Bitcoin or cryptocurrency is. And hopefully that's helpful. If it's not, feel free to ask us questions, and we'll try to get the questions that we have.